Hello, and welcome to Watching for a Friend, where I watch movies because I love them and let you know if it's worth a watch or not. Today I'm going to be reviewing Sweetheart, which is a Blumhouse Productions movie that came straight to Netflix, starring Kiersey Clemons. So before I get into the main part of the review, let me just say that I really like this movie and I absolutely give it a thumbs up. If you haven't heard of this movie at all, I highly recommend going to watch the movie before you watch this review because there's going to be some spoilers, and I actually hadn't heard of the movie prior to watching it, and I felt like I had the optimal experience watching it because I was able to go in with fresh eyes. I didn't have any preconceived ideas about it, and I was really surprised with the direction that the movie went into. So if you have not heard anything, you've done no research, you don't know anything about this movie, please go on and watch it now. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Now, getting into the meat of this review, let me tell you a little bit about who I think will enjoy this movie the most. People who enjoy a strong female lead are going to really enjoy this movie. Kiersey Clemons did a phenomenal job in my book of really being able to carry this movie without a ton of dialogue. The majority of the movie was spent with her by herself on a deserted island, which I'll go into in a little bit, but the majority of the movie was just her reacting and showing a wide range of emotions, and I think she did a really great job at doing that. I really think she was a smart choice as the lead in this particular movie. The second group of people that I think will like this movie are people who are into survival movies. I myself love seeing the main character go through a ton and have to find smart ways to get out of it. I thought they did a really wonderful job at nailing that in this particular movie. They were able to find lots of smart, I felt like Kiersey Clemons' character, Jen, did a really good job at being resourceful. I thought she used a lot of ingenuity, and I thought it was a very smart way that her character went about surviving being on this desert island. The third group of people that I think will enjoy this movie in particular are people who enjoy sci-fi horror without the gore. I personally love sci-fi horror movies. I love horror movies, but I'm not a huge fan of gore, surprisingly. So I think this did a really good job at balancing out the gore with actual terrifying horror. Now, the last group of people that I think will enjoy this movie are people who can look past mediocre dialogue, because there was some of that, especially in the middle of the second act, or middle to end of the second act. There was some really weak dialogue in there.
Hanging over your head. You know that, right? This whole thing, Jen, it's so crazy. I was having a great time all week on a boat with my friends. Weather was perfect. Brought you on this incredible trip. Everyone's having a great time, except you, right?
And the night you come up to tell me that you might not be happy, that you maybe don't want to be in this.
Storm clouds roll in. How perfect is that? No matter where you go, there's always a storm right behind you.
For a good plot. Overall, the story and the plot were really good. It was very consistent and didn't have a ton of holes, but the dialogue itself wasn't that strong. So if you're not willing to get past those things, you probably aren't going to enjoy this movie, to be honest. I think about the type of survival movie this is, being that it's on a desert island, was Castaway, which I really liked, but I saw when I was a teenager. And as a teenager, it was really long. I didn't really understand the idea of this actor losing all this, like gaining all this weight and then losing all this weight, and how huge that is. As an adult now, like, that's nearly impossible. I mean, I realize the dedication that it had to take for him to lose all that weight for that movie. But I will say that the entire movie as a teenager, I was like, something's got to jump out at him. A wild animal, a monster. I really wanted it to take a different twist. I wanted it to turn into like a scary twist, and it never did. Now, overall, it was a wonderful movie, obviously acclaimed by many, and I really enjoyed it. But what I really loved about this movie is how it took a sci-fi twist. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, overall, like I said, Kiersey Clemons' character, Jen, did a phenomenal job at portraying a wide range of emotions. I thought she did great with that. I also thought, which I hear is very difficult for actors when you're acting in, you're not actually seeing something. So I really liked the way that Kiersey carried this character. I felt like she really was surviving alone on a desert island. And I felt like she was very smart with her decisions. And that's something that when it comes to survival movies, or even when it comes to sci-fi or horror movies, I feel like the writers tend to lean on the fact that the characters make stupid decisions, and they're clumsy and they don't know what they're doing, and they always take the door that's going to lead to the most destruction. This movie didn't rely on that. I felt like the writers did a really wonderful job at making sure that she was still smart about everything that she did, and that just being alone on a desert island and a lack of resources, and then having another sci-fi element thrown in, which I'll get to in just a moment, is enough for someone to, to create tension within the story. So I thought that the writers did a really good job with that. So overall, again, storyline was really strong. There weren't a ton of inconsistencies or plot holes in it. The middle to the end, in the second act of the movie, leading into the third act, we get some characters that are incorporated, which were Jen's friends. And that is where the dialogue really starts to fail. They come in and they're supposed to be kind of shady characters, and they do portray that well enough, but the dialogue, they alluded to some things that you didn't really care about, and nor did they end up being a factor into any of the movie at all. So additional characters, I honestly feel that they could have written without it. If it was just Jen on this island, I think they actually could have, kept that tension alive. They didn't need the other two characters. I think they wrote those in just to kind of fill in some space. That's just how I felt personally. I didn't feel like these characters added, nor did they take away. Because again, I had not heard of this movie. I hadn't watched any trailers, and I really went into it blind. So I had no clue that it was going to turn into a creature feature. I was so excited. So when watching the movie, you think that she's going along just trying to survive on this desert island. Your main focus as the audience is, how is she going to get off this desert island? How is she going to survive long enough to be rescued? Is somebody going to come and get her? Is she going to be able to? She's very resourceful, so I just assumed that she would be able to build a raft or a boat of some kind, and she was going to get herself off that island. That's just how strong she was from what they were portraying. Now, when this element of a sea monster came in, I was really excited. And the scene where they introduced the sea monster I loved it. I thought it was an amazing scene. I'll try and place a shot in here of it. But basically, she hears a helicopter flying overhead in one scene, and she had already survived on the island for I think 3 or 4 nights at this time. So she had had a routine. She was still trying to find her way off of this island, and she shot a flare into the air. As the flare descends into the horizon lights up, and you see this huge monster just kind of standing in the water on the horizon. And now this monster has kind of pinned her and knows she's on the island, and from there on out, this monster is pursuing her, and she's just trying to A, survive long enough to be rescued, and B, try to figure out what this monster is, what it wants, and how to make sure that she can stay alive long enough, and this monster won't get her. So loved that element. I was so surprised. There was some foreshadowing in the beginning, but what I loved about the writing is that you kind of ignore the foreshadowing in the beginning unless you're really looking for something like that. Going back and watching it again, the foreshadowing's, right in front of your face. But, it had left little crumbs, and there's something going on the island, but you aren't quite sure what it is. You don't know if it's a sea animal. You don't know if it's a land animal. And then for it to be revealed that it's a sea monster, I loved. And it was actually a scary looking sea monster. So, and they didn't use CGI for it. They actually used sci-fi effects, which I absolutely recommend for any filmmaker out there. Please stop using the CGI. I love the sci-fi effects, the makeup, the prosthetics, all of that is so much more impactful than CGI in my book. Now, once the sea monster is incorporated into the story, it ups the ante for her, makes it much more high tension. And even for a second, I was like, maybe she is making, you know, they allude to the fact that she, you know, in her previous life, you know, may have been a little bit of a shady character. You can't quite tell. But for a moment, I was like, oh man, maybe she died in this, you know, crash that made her wash up on this desert island, or maybe it's a figment of her imagination. There's so many things that you're trying to figure out if it actually happened. It was straight up creature feature. Love that. It went really fast. It wasn't a short, it wasn't a long movie. It was a really easy, short watch. And I like that they kept it short and they didn't prolong it, trying to make unnecessary dialogue or unnecessary, you know, unnecessary tension just because. And I love that she made smart decisions throughout the entire movie and they didn't rely on her, you know, falling or losing. She did lose a weapon at one point, but it made complete sense why she lost the weapon. And then at the very end, her, you know, character arc is that she actually is super smart and she knows how to survive. She hasn't been believed. She's been under this boyfriend who's a little domineering you know, he's dominating over her a lot. He thinks he owns her in some way, and she really kind of takes back her power, I guess, is the commentary on that at the very end. And then overall, I love that it was a black lead. I mean, you can't be mad when you have a sci-fi movie and a desert island survival movie with a black woman as a lead. That's just amazing. And I want to see more of this. We have to do more of this. I would love to see so much more diversity in sci-fi just because it's one of my favorite genres. Also, the end, obviously, there was a face-off between her and the monster. And I loved it because it wasn't long. They didn't prolong it. There weren't huge explosions. They did set half of the island on fire. But at the end of the day, that's a good thing. She needed to do that because the planes and the helicopters that fly overhead will see that and immediately, you know, come to the island to rescue her. That could be seen from miles and miles away. So, you know, at the end of the day, she had to do what she had to do to get rescued. And the face-off between her and the monster lasted for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, which if it lasted any longer than that, I would have gotten worn out as an audience member. I would have been like, okay, come on, how many times can she stab him with sticks, you know? And then the thing that I loved that this writer did is they had her cut the monster's head off. And that's something that people never do because they're always like, oh, we need to leave options open for a sequel. And I'm like, no, cut the dang monster's head off. Why wouldn't you cut the dang monster's head off? There's no way you would survive on an island for for a week and not cut the monster's head off and not like rip it off if you had to. So I definitely love that she took the monster's head off. And then when we think about her character arc, she had a little monologue toward the end of the movie about spending the majority of her life not being believed. And her boyfriend, who was one of the friends that came up on the island, was alluding to the fact that, you know, she wouldn't have the life that she had without him. She had nothing and nobody believed her, all this stuff. They kept alluding to this. The dialogue got really, really weak. So most of the dialogue that they mentioned really doesn't play into the plot, except for the fact that prior to her being stuck on this island, you know, she had some personality issues and nobody really believed the things that she was saying. So now she has this monster's head when she does get rescued so that she can, you know, I'm sure science is going to have a field day with that. but they have no choice but to believe her. So I did love that that was the parting shot that we had, is her walking away from this monster with his head in hand. Half of the island is on fire. She'll most likely get rescued. And, you know, she should be good to go. She can start a fresh life. So again, 2 thumbs up for this movie. I highly recommend it. It's on Netflix right now, and it was a fun watch. It was really easy. It's nice and short, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I want to be able to do more of this, and I want to hear from you guys what you think about the movies that are coming out, and let me know which movie you'd like to see me review next. All right. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.